All right, how's everybody doing today? Hotep, hey, this is Michael Imhotep, founder of the African History Network, host of the African History Network show. It is Saturday, July 27th, 2024, and we are live. So I wanted to come on for a few minutes and talk about my new 12-week online history course that starts up today. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. So I wanted to do a overview, do a class preview of this class, and some people have been asking me when am I going to teach the class again. So class is going to start today as soon as I finish this broadcast. It's going to be each Saturday, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Okay. Now we have the class lesson plan at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. So when you register for the class, you'll see the class lesson plan there, and you can download the class lesson plan also. We deal with thousands of years of history and what leads up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. I do a PowerPoint presentation. We have book references, articles, video clips, so you'll never look at history the same way again. If we look here at the class lesson plan, we can't start studying our history in slavery, even when we study the transatlantic slave trade, which is important to study. We can't start in 1619 or in the 1440s when the Portuguese get involved in the transatlantic slave trade. We know the transatlantic slave trade starts about 1441 with the Portuguese. We have to understand the history chronologically. We have to understand the history chronologically and deal with the 800-year occupation of Europe by the Africans known as the Moors, who enter into the Iberian Peninsula, today known as Spain and Portugal, from North Africa in 711 AD. They go through Morocco in 711 AD. This course not only deals with the transatlantic slave trade, but thousands of years of history that leads up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. So I do a PowerPoint presentation. We have book references, articles, video clips, excerpts of interviews that I've done with some of our scholars like Professor James Small, Professor Kabahaya Walter Kamene, Renoka Rashidi, Tony Browder, etc. So, and this information is PG-13, so you can use this with your children also. You don't have to buy any of the books if you don't want to. I'll show you excerpts of the book on the screen, but they're good to have for your own personal library. All right. And also, I'm going to show you some of the slides that we show in the class as well. Okay. How's everybody doing? Give us a thumbs up, give us a heart, give us a like on this broadcast, and invite your friends to tune in also. If we go here to the PowerPoint presentation here quickly. Now I've been teaching this class on and off since 2017. Okay. And, you know, I've been studying history 34 years now. And this class has evolved a lot since I first started teaching it. Okay, so we have so much additional information in this class. This course not only deals with the transatlantic slave trade, but thousands of years leading up to it. Now, we know August 20th, 2019 marked the 400th year anniversary of the 20 and odd Africans who came into Point Comfort on August 20th, 1619, in what would later be called the colony of Virginia. This was known as the Year of Return, as many African Americans were and continue to connect to Africa and traveling to Ghana and other West African countries. When we discuss the transatlantic slave trade, we first have to understand that African people are the original people of North, Central, and South America, and have been in the land we call the United States of America at least 51,700 years. And these were the Khoisan that Dr. David Imhotep talks about in his book, The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence. Now, over the past few years, we have seen an increasing attack on African American history, the rights of African Americans, etc. We see what's going on in Florida with their college board standards when it comes to social studies and the attack on the African American on the advanced placement African American studies course in Florida. We saw protests behind that. We saw renewed attacks over the past few years when it comes to teaching African American history during African American History Month or Black History Month, because of the anti-critical race theory laws that have been passed in a number of states, especially former Confederate states. Okay, we've seen articles like this one here: mock slave auctions, racist lessons, how U.S. history class often traumatizes, dehumanizes Black students. Or that was from USA Today. Or this one here from USA Today: Republican state lawmakers want to punish schools that teach the 1619 Project. We've seen a backlash to the racial reckoning that was taking place in various parts of the country because of the killing of George Floyd, May 25th, 2020. And Project 2023 is a continuation of Project 2025, I should say, is a continuation of that backlash. Now, I first found out about Project 2025 in 2023. I've been talking about it since 2023. It was, I think it was August of 2023 when it was first released by the Heritage Foundation. Okay, so I've been talking about it since then. We saw this piece here from NBC News: new Florida standards teach students that some Black people benefited from slavery because it taught useful skills. So we see this nonsense that is taking place across the country. April 2023, Mandate for Leadership, that was released in April 2023 by the Heritage Foundation. So we see all of this is taking place across the country, and your understanding of politics is directly related to your understanding of history. Your understanding of politics is directly related to your understanding of history. Okay, so if we look at the course outline, now we have this course outline right on the homepage of our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. So this class is going to be taught on Saturdays, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to teach class number 1 as soon as I finish this broadcast here today. So this class starts up Saturday, July 27th, 2024. And when you scroll down the page, we have the first class that I teach, Black Resistance Movements, from Christopher Columbus to the Haitian Revolution and the Black Power Movement, 1492 to 1968. That's the second class that I teach. This is the first class right here. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. So when you scroll down, click right here to register for this full course. Class is on sale, $80. Then we have the lesson plan right here, and you can download this lesson plan as well. So this is a scheduled for a 12-week online course. So if we look at, I'm going to highlight some of the lesson plan here, some of what we're going to cover. So we'll look at, we do with thousands of years of history, and we'll look at some ancient history. We'll talk about Dinknesh, Australopithecus afarensis, who was discovered in 1974 by Dr. Donald Johansen. And it was Dr. Joseph Ben Jacquemin that called her Dinknesh, which means you are amazing. She's known as the mother of humankind. We'll look at a global timeline of history. BlackPast.org has a really good global timeline of history. We'll look at things like the Berlin Conference, 1884, 1885, to try to get a good understanding of this chronology of history. So during the overview of the class, during class number 1, I'll try to lay a foundation and look at some different periods of time for us to get a better understanding of history and how this chronology of history plays out. And when we have these discussions, you know, I understand that people come to the discussion with different levels of understanding of history. Okay, different levels of understanding of history. So that's why it's important to try to lay a good foundation. We'll look at, you know, I talk about Juneteenth some as well, and how Juneteenth can be used as a very powerful tool to educate our people on history and what happened after, what happened during the Civil War, what happened after slavery ended, the Reconstruction era. But also we have to protect the history of Juneteenth and correct the history of Juneteenth. Okay, Juneteenth was not the last day of slavery, as unfortunately you'll continue to hear sometimes in mainstream media. That's just blatantly false. Juneteenth was not the last day of slavery. We know the Emancipation Proclamation did not legally free the slaves. And we know that Kentucky and Delaware did not abolish slavery until December 18th, 1865, because Kentucky and Delaware were exempt from the Emancipation Proclamation. Okay, so because it only applied to territories or states in rebellion, and they, Maryland, Missouri, Kentucky, and Delaware, which are known as the border states, they stayed loyal to the Union. They did not take up arms against the Union, so they were allowed to keep their slaves. Okay, so we'll talk about, like I said, we'll talk about Dinknesh. We'll deal with, we'll talk some about Juneteenth. This was a good article from 2021 entitled, "Most Americans Know Little or Nothing About Juneteenth." Most Americans know little or nothing about Juneteenth, poll finds. Now, some know more today, but even for, you know, African Americans, I speak at some various Juneteenth celebrations. And even, you know, this year, this past June, a lot of people who I was encountering really didn't understand the history of Juneteenth, the fact that the Emancipation Proclamation did not free the slaves. And even when we talk about June 19th, 1865, in Galveston, Texas, Major General Gordon Granger delivering General Order Number 3. The 250,000 enslaved Africans in Galveston, Texas, all of them did not get the word on June 19th, 1865, that slavery had ended. Now, this is before the 13th Amendment, which was ratified December 6, 1865, okay, which legally frees the slaves. But it's going to take Major General Gordon Granger and his approximately 2,000 Union troops, almost all of them African-American men. It's going to take them almost 1 year to go all throughout Texas and physically bring Texas back into the Union. It took military force to do this. So different cities in Texas get the word on different dates, that those African Americans are going to get the word on different dates that they were free. Okay, it's going to come to Houston, Texas. That's going to be on June 20th, if I remember correctly. June 20th, Houston, Texas. June 20th, Austin, Texas. June 23rd. Okay. All of them did not get the word on June 19th. June 19th is the agreed upon date to commemorate Africans in Texas getting the word that they were free. But that's not the date that everybody found out. And we know that there were some slave owners who kept their slaves until 1866 as well. Okay, so it's a deep history, but Juneteenth gives us an opportunity to force into a national conversation a history that Republicans are passing laws in various states to suppress the teaching of that history. Okay, so this gives us an opportunity to correct the history of Juneteenth and protect the history of Juneteenth. And we know that Project 2025 is going to continue the misinformation and continue to attack the teaching of the civil rights movement, African-American history to various extents, the history of slavery, etc. All of this is connected. Okay, this did not come out of a vacuum. This is all a white backlash to any perceived periods of advancement that African Americans make. And we see that we can trace really the beginning of a lot of this going back to September 2020, when Donald Trump did a executive order banning critical race theory in when it comes to training for federal employees. This was September 2020 that Donald Trump signed this executive order, and this is going to be 6 months before Christopher Rufo, the conservative activist Christopher Rufo, before he did his series of tweets in March 2021, talking about how conservatives wanted to redefine critical race theory. So if you look at this, and they wanted to make it an umbrella term to deal with anything that they didn't like about race, racism, the teaching of African American history, things like this. They wanted to redefine the term critical race theory. But very quickly here, and see, once again, your understanding of politics is directly related to your understanding of history. So we have to understand that politics is the legal distribution of scarce wealth, power, and resources, and the writing of laws, statutes, ordinances, amendments, and treaties, their adoption, interpretation, and enforcement. So this article from NBCnews.com, how Trump ignited the fight over critical race theory in schools. Republican lawmakers across the country have proposed bills to ban critical race theory in K through 12 schools. Here's what that really means. Well, critical race theory is not taught in K through 12. So they're just making this up to create a straw man attack, to just create a false target so that they can then get laws passed that they already wanted to get passed. Okay. This article is by Shar Adams from May 10th, 2021. And the part that I want to focus in on here in this piece talks about Donald Trump. The proposed policies mimic former President Donald Trump's September memo, September 2020 memo ordering the Office of Management and Budget to stop funding, training on critical race theory for federal employees, calling it a quote unquote propaganda effort, propaganda effort. A lot of this starts with Donald Trump. And then you're going to have the echo chamber of Fox News. You're going to have the push for parent organizations like Moms Against Liberty to run for school boards, school board positions, to push book bans, things of this nature. They're fighting these culture wars. Okay, Republicans are fighting these culture wars. Around the same time in September 2020, Donald Trump condemned the 1619 Project, a Pulitzer Prize winning 2019 New York Times report led by reporter Nicole Hannah-Jones that holds America was truly founded not in 1776, but in 1619, when the first enslaved people were brought to the colonies. Educators embraced this message and began utilizing the 1619 Project and looking for resources to teach a more holistic history of the country. Donald Trump rebuked the 1619 Project as a quote, warped, distorted, end quote, portrayal of American history. Both the memo and this attack sparked the commission of the 1776 Project, okay, the 1776 Project, meant to combat contents of the 1619 Project. The countrywide uprisings in the wake of George Floyd's death, which was May 25th, 2020, only fueled the matter, with pundits debating the nation's fraught history of racism. So Donald Trump's memo on critical race theory, September 2020, that's a few months after George Floyd is killed. Okay, and remember, you had all the protests in the streets behind the killing of George Floyd. This was during COVID, so a lot of people were at home anyway. They're watching the news, they're watching cable news, they're following every aspect of the protest. And then also keep in mind, the next month after George Floyd was killed was June 2020. That's when a lot of people found out about Juneteenth. A lot of people found out about Juneteenth, June 2020. So they started celebrating Juneteenth as well. And June 1st of 2020 was the 99th commemoration of the Tulsa Race Massacre. So a lot of people started finding out across the country about the Tulsa Race Massacre, a lot of non-white people. And probably a few African Americans as well started finding about the Tulsa Race Massacre as well, right in the month of June. Now, thus, although President Joe Biden reversed Donald Trump's initial ban in January of 2021, when Biden became president, the seed had been planted. The seed had been planted. Okay. So this is when you see me on Roland Martin Unfiltered, and I've been on almost 4 years. Every Friday as a panelist providing historical and political analysis. When you see me on my show, the African History Network show that I've been doing 14 years, you hear me say your understanding of politics is directly related to your understanding of history, because politics is the legal distribution of scarce wealth, power, and resources, and the writing of laws, statutes, ordinances, amendments, and treaties, their adoption, interpretation, and enforcement. And laws and policies shape conditions, impact economies, movements come about to fight against conditions, to get laws and policies put in place to address conditions. Okay, so we see this continuum. Well, a good example of that would be the modern day civil rights movement fighting against segregation that was written into state constitutions, like the Alabama State Constitution in 1901, Mississippi State Constitution of 1890, which was a result of the collapse of Reconstruction in 1877, and then Jim Crow laws being written into place, written in the state constitution, so the white supremacists could take back control of state government and local government and suppress the African American vote. Okay, and this is all a legacy of slavery and the Civil War. All right, so we'll look at going back to our outline of what we're going to cover in the class, because we have a ton of information to cover. Okay, 80 to 100 articles we'll look at. It's a 12-week online course. There's about 15 books that we reference as well. They have about 200 slides in my slideshow presentation that I put together. We'll talk about Imhotep, the world's first multi-genius, father of medicine. Imhotep means he who comes in peace in the ancient Middle Eastern language. We'll look at the dating systems of BC and AD, popularized by the English monk Bede, the Venerable Bede. It's important to understand dating systems, whether you're talking about BC, AD, or BCE, before the Common Era, or CE, Common Era. We'll talk some about the 1619 Project, and much of what we've been told about the 1619 Project is wrong. Much of what we've been told about the 1619, much of what we've been told about Virginia's first Africans in 1619 is wrong. There's a good article from VirginiaMercury.com that talks about this. I've dealt with this history a number of times as well. And if we look at here, I'm going to flip over to the slideshow presentation for a minute. Because one was not talked about is the fact that African people were here going back at least 51,700 years. These were the Khoisan, who come from Southern Africa, and they're the ancestors to the Ainu and the Twa, okay? And they go all around the world. 1526. Before 1619, there was 1526. This is 93 years before Jamestown, Virginia. A really good article from the Washington Post. Before 1619, there was 1526. The mystery of the first enslaved Africans and what became the United States. Spanish explorers brought 100 slaves to a doomed settlement in South Carolina or Georgia. Within weeks, the subjugated revolted, then vanished. Okay. Then when we look at this piece here, now this is a historical marker at Point Comfort in Virginia, and it says first Africans of Virginia, and it says the first documented Africans in Virginia arrived. Let me see. Let me go to Let me look directly at my slide. The first documented Africans in Virginia arrived here in August 1619 on the White Lion, which was a pirate ship. The White Lion, as English privateer, an English privateer based in the Netherlands. Colonial officials traded food for the 20 and odd Africans who had been captured from a Portuguese slave ship. Now, the Portuguese slave ship was the San Juan Batista. That was the name of it, the San Juan Batista. Among present-day Hampton's earliest African residents were Anthony and Isabella. Their son, William, who was born about 1624, was the first child of African ancestry known to have been born in Virginia, okay, circa 1624. Many of the earliest Africans were held as slaves, but some individuals became free. A legal framework for hereditary lifelong slavery to Virginia evolved during the 1600s. The United States abolished slavery in 1865. So if we codified slave laws didn't exist in 1619 in the colonies and what will become the 13 colonies. First colony to have codified slave laws is going to be Massachusetts, 1641. In chapter 2 of Before the Mayflower by Lerone Bennett Jr., Lerone Bennett Jr. Lays his history out. And my copy of Before the Mayflower is here somewhere in the office. But if we look here at this article briefly from VirginiaMercury.com, I'm going to pull this up here. So how's everybody doing today? How you like this type of information? Are you learning anything? Give us a thumbs up. Give us a heart. Give us a like on this broadcast. And you can register for this new 12-week online course right now. We're going to have class number 1 today. This starts up Saturday, July 27th, 2024. So we're going to jump into class number 1 as soon as I finish this class preview. Okay, if we look at this right here, much of what we've been told about Virginia's 1619 first Africans is wrong. Much of what we've been told about Virginia's 1619 first Africans is wrong. This is from August 11th, 2019. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. You can read it, but it gives some background history on those 20-odd Africans, and they're on the San Juan Batista Portuguese slave ship, and there's about 350 Africans there. They're from Angola, from the area that's present-day Angola. In late August, one of the English ships, the White Lion, showed up at Point Comfort at the mouth of the James River in present-day Hampton, Virginia, and sold perhaps 30 slaves for desperately needed supplies. Was this the beginning of slavery in the New World? No, historians say the Spanish had enslaved Africans in present-day Latin America for more than a century. Was this the beginning of slavery in what became the U.S.? No, the Spanish took enslaved Africans to a settlement in the present-day Carolinas, North Carolina, South Carolina, in 1526. Those Africans rebelled and the settlement failed. Also, the Spanish took African slaves to St. Augustine, which, unlike the Jamestown colony in Virginia, still thrives in 1565. Quote, Americans tend to forget about the Spanish colonies in North America and focus only on the English heritage, said Adam W. Dean, a University of Lynchburg historian who specializes in slavery, the Civil War, and Reconstruction. In an exhibition, the Virginia Museum of History and Culture in Richmond calls the Point Comfort arrivals the first enslaved Africans in British North America, the first enslaved Africans in British North America. Other sources use similar language. Other sources use similar language. Then that's the best description. Not really, said Beth Alston, a Hampton historian, a Hampton History Museum historian who wrote a 17-page report on the 1619 Africans. It turns out that enslaved Africans were taken to English-controlled Bermuda, part of North America in 1616, okay, Beth Alston said. Then what kind of first was Point Comfort's 1619? Here are all the qualifiers that have to go with that. The first documented Africans to arrive in mainland English America. Okay, so read the rest of this right here. But a lot of what we know about the 29 Africans in 1619 in Point Comfort, which was it was actually Hampton, Virginia, not Jamestown. A lot of what we have been taught, a lot of what we think we know is wrong. So check out this piece here from virginiamercury.com, and then look at the article from the Washington Post dealing with 1526, because 1526 is not talked about a lot when it comes to history. And so many people focus on 1619, but I'm like, well, wait a second. If you want to talk about Africans being enslaved, Africans were being enslaved 93 years before 1619. This is before 1619. There was 1526. Let's get this up. This is from the Washington Post. All right, this one right here. Before 1619, there was 1526, the mystery of the first enslaved Africans of what became the United States. Spanish explorers brought 100 slaves to a doomed settlement in South Carolina or Georgia. Within weeks, the subjugated revolted, then vanished. Now, this is from, what year is this? This is from September 7th, 2019 by Jillian Brockhale for the Washington Post. Really a good article. And I'll constantly hear people talk about 1619. But notice when people talk about this, very few mention 1526. Which is, to me, is really strange. Especially when you look at the fact that the Spanish were the second ones involved in the transatlantic slave trade, and the Spanish were involved in the transatlantic slave trade before the English got involved. The English get involved in 1562. All right, let's continue. I want to go back to the class outline here. All right, so we'll look at some of the history of 1619 and 1526. We'll look at the language spoken in the film Black Panther, because the film Black Panther is something that we study in the class as well, as the film Black Panther relates to African culture, African language, and African history. Okay, it's a powerful movie on multiple levels. Okay, the film Black Panther. It's a powerful movie on multiple levels. We'll talk about what a Bantu language is also, because the movie spoken in the film Black Panther is isiXhosa, and isiXhosa is a Bantu language. Now, Maryland, Missouri, Kentucky, and Delaware were border states, and they were exempt from the Emancipation Proclamation. Maryland did not abolish slavery until November 1st, 1864. Okay, this is almost 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation. Okay, Maryland did not abolish slavery until November 1st, 1864. There's a really good article from the Washington Post again called The Not Quite Free State of Maryland. Let me pull this one up here. The Not Quite Free State of Maryland. And this is one of the articles that we'll look at in the class. I use this in this class and my second class on Black resistance movements, looking at history 1492 to 1968. The Not Quite Free State. Maryland dragged its feet on emancipation during Civil War. They had to put it on the ballot to determine whether they were going to end slavery or not. Elsewhere in the country, anti-slavery measures progressed rapidly. Congress freed the slaves in the District of Columbia in 1862, compensating their owners. This was the Compensated Emancipation Act of April 16, 1862. That only applied to Washington, D.C. It did not apply to the rest of the country. Okay, it only applied to slaveholders in Washington, D.C. And there is a good piece from, I think, Zen Education Project that talks about this. This also came up when I did my presentation for the Detroit Reparations Task Force, March 2nd, 2024 as well. But Zen Education Project has a piece on this, and Senate.gov also, official website of the U.S. Senate. The Emancipation Proclamation, which freed the slaves in the states that seceded, went into effect on January 1st, 1863, but Maryland did not act until 1864 when it held a referendum. And even then, the outcome was not at all certain. The vote tipped in favor of abolition only after the absentee ballots of soldiers fighting for the North were counted. The final tally was 30,174 in favor of freeing the slaves to 29,799 against freeing the slaves. Okay, so it's only about 400 and some votes that separated those who wanted to free the slaves from those who did not want to. On November 1st, 1864, Maryland slaves were declared free only a few months before Congress would approve the 13th Amendment abolishing slavery. Many blacks in Maryland had taken matters into their own hands by that time, either escaping to the district or enlisting in the Union Army, where they served as freemen. Okay, so read the rest of this piece right here. The Not Quite Free State, Maryland dragged its feet on emancipation during the Civil War. All right, and let me see something. Hold on. All right. Okay, let's continue. I want to go back to the course outline here. Oh, also, let me show you this article. This is from this piece is from Senate.gov. Senate.gov is the official website of the U.S. Senate. This deals with the Compensated Emancipation Act of April 16th, 1862. Landmark legislation, the District of Columbia Compensated Emancipation Act. Okay. And you had about 2,900 petitions filed. President Lincoln signed the bill into law on April 16th, 1862, freeing enslaved people in the district and compensating owners. Freeing enslaved people in the district and compensating owners. The Hartford Daily Current celebrated that, quote, not a slave exists in the District of Columbia. Their shackles have fallen, never to be restored. In the months following the enactment of the law, commissioners approved more than 930 petitions, granting freedom to 2,989 former enslaved people. Yeah, 2,000, almost 3,000 were freed. Okay. DC Emancipation Day has been celebrated in the district each year since 1862. Just 5 months later, in September 1862, using his powers as commander-in-chief, Lincoln announced his intention to emancipate enslaved people located in the states, quote unquote, in rebellion, located in the states, quote unquote, in rebellion. On January 1st, 1863, the Emancipation Proclamation granted freedom to enslaved people residing in Confederate states not occupied by Union forces. The 13th Amendment, ratified by the states on December 6, 1865, abolished slavery within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. So check this one out because it deals with it really deals with correcting a lot of misinformation about history. Now, there were February 22nd, 2024 on MSNBC, Tremaine Lee talked about his podcast dealing with reparations, and it can be found at msnbc.com. And in his podcast, he talked about you had 5 or 6 African-American slave owners in Washington, D.C., and because most of them owned family members. They were buying family members out of freedom. They were buying family members out of slavery, I should say. And they submitted petitions, and they were granted reparations for their slaves also. So you'll have these exceptions to the rule. You'll have these exceptions to the rule. All right, let's go back and look at the class outline. Who still needs to register for this online course? Class number 1 starts today. We'll be here a few more minutes, and I'm going to jump into class at our online school and start teaching this class. This is Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. And I'm going to post the link here to register for this class. Just a second here. This content is PG-13, so you can use this content with your children also. So we do the sessions live. All the sessions are archived and recorded. You can go back and watch it anytime. So a year from now, 2 years from now, you can go back and watch the entire course. All right, so we'll deal with the language spoken in the film Black Panther, which is Isikosa. We'll talk about what the word Wakanda means. Wakanda is a real word, and we see it in the Omaha, Ponca, and Sioux Indian languages. We'll look at the real-life African and indigenous inspirations behind the folklore that we see in the film Black Panther. Also, Malcolm X, March 29th, 1964, when he delivered the Ballad of the Bullet in Washington Heights, New York. Malcolm X used the term African American. I don't know why people think that the Reverend Jesse Jackson created the term African American. That's just blatant nonsense. This is what happens when you don't understand history. He reintroduced the term African American, but he did not create the term African American. I don't know why people would think that. So I did this post on Facebook in February of 2024. I think it was February 7th. And I said, did you know Malcolm X used the term African American in the Ballad of the Bullet? Oh, on March 29th, 1964, but also April 3rd, 1964. No, Reverend Jesse Jackson did not create the term. No, the Reverend Jesse Jackson did not create the term African American. And if you have the book Malcolm X Speaks, which has speeches from Malcolm X in 1963, 1964, and 65, so later in his life. It's edited with prefatory notes by George Brightman. This book right here, okay? They have the version of the Ballad of the Bullet from April 3rd, 1964. He delivered in Cleveland, Ohio, Corey Methodist Church, Cleveland, Ohio. Page 36, what I have highlighted here, he says, right now in this country, if you and I, 22 million African Americans, that's what we are, Africans who are in America, you're nothing but Africans, okay? So read that and research Brother Malcolm. I want to go back to the timeline here. So the term African American is much older than we thought. There's a good article from the New York Times dealing with this. The term African American dates back to 1782. It's not a nationality. It's an ethnic group. Nobody said it was a nationality. Because you have people that pop up on your timeline. African American is not a nationality. Nobody said it was. And then you just say, oh, you can't be from two continents. Why don't you go tell that to Asian Americans? See what they say. The term, let's see. Okay. So we do it. The pyramid principle that I use in my classes, that two of my teachers, Dr. Linda Jeffries and Professor James Small, use when they teach as well. This right here. Let's go back to the PowerPoint presentation. So this is Dr. Francis Cress Welsing that wrote the ISIS papers, Keys to the Colors. I interviewed her 3 times on the African History Network show. I did this post back in July 2023 when they had the Essence Music Festival. Okay, the Essence Music Festival, and Megan Thee Stallion performed, and there was a lot of social media discourse about it and a lot of articles written. And I posted this meme here with a quote from Dr. Welsing, because unfortunately, I saw Megan Thee Stallion's performance. Essence Music Festival, they broadcasted live on Hulu in prime time, Hulu Live. and it was horrible. It was horrible. Dr. Wilson said that we're the only people on this entire planet who have been taught to sing and praise our demeanment. I'm a bitch, I'm a hoe, I'm a gangster, I'm a thug, I'm a dog. If you can train people to demean and degrade themselves, you can oppress them forever. You can even program them to kill themselves, and they won't even understand what happened. Now, she was a psychiatrist. Okay. So if you're not familiar with Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, she's an ancestor now. I was at her memorial service in Washington, D.C. But if you're not familiar with Dr. Welsing, go research that sister. And there was this article here from okplayer.com. India Ari criticizes Megan Thee Stallion and Janelle Monáe for sexual essence festival performances. Go read that. But when we look at the pyramid principle, and two of my teachers, Dr. Leonard Jeffries and Professor James Small, use the pyramid principle when they teach. You have the foundation of the pyramid is African history and culture. African history and culture. It's African history and culture that gives us our VIPs, our values, our interests, and our principles. This gives us this gives us a cultural paradigm that we see reality through. And the cultural paradigm influences the two sides of the pyramid, which is economic empowerment and political empowerment. And it's our history and culture that influences how we engage in economic empowerment, how we engage in economics, and how we understand economics, and how we engage in politics. Because politics is more than just voting. Voting is important, but it's only one small part of politics. Politics is the legal distribution of scarce wealth, power, and resources, and the writing of laws, statutes, ordinances, amendments, and treaties, their adoption, interpretation, and enforcement. So we have to have a synthesis of all three of these, not just one or two. We have to have a synthesis of all three of these. And when you look at different African empires, different African cultures that we like to talk about throughout history, whether it's ancient Kemet, whether it's Abyssinia, Ethiopia, whether it's Nubia, Ta-Nehisi, whether it's Ghana, Songhai, Mali, those empires, you know, they had some type of political structure. They had some type of cultural structure as well, some type of cultural foundation, historical foundation. They had some type of political structure, but also some type of economic structure as well. Usually they have some type of means of exchange, some type of currency, whether it's gold or salt, whether it's on the barter system, but they have some type of economic structure. And you may have some type of African marketplace. They may do trade with other nations, but we're going to see this in ancient times. We're going to see agriculture. We're going to see some type of enterprise take place, some type of commerce. So we're going to see all of this in these different African empires. Okay. So why should African Americans today be any different? Why should African Americans today be any different? We'll look at excerpts of the book. You know, I'll talk about Dr. David Imhotep, who's a friend of mine. He's an ancestor now. We know he passed away in 2023. But his groundbreaking book, The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence, he lays out this history, and his book contains 713 footnotes, and thoroughly documenting an African presence in the land we call the United States of America, going back at least 51,700 years ago. And he cites a archaeological discovery by Dr. Albert Goodyear made in Allendale County, South Carolina in 2004. And they found 13 different types of evidence thoroughly documenting an African presence in this country going back at least 51,700 years ago. They found artifacts, architecture, campsites, carvings, Egyptian writings, footprints in lava, genetic M174D haploid groups dealing with DNA and genetics, linguistics, paintings, scales, skeletons, structures, and tools. Okay. So here's a picture of Dr. Albert Goodyear. Now, this is a good article from November 18, 2004 from ScienceDaily.com called New Evidence Puts Man in North America 50,000 Years Ago. New evidence puts man in North America 50,000 years ago. Radiocarbon tests of carbonized plant remains, where artifacts were unearthed last May along the Savannah River in Allendale County by University of South Carolina archaeologist Dr. Albert Goodyear, indicate that the sediments containing these artifacts are at least 50,000 years old, meaning that humans inhabited North America long before the last ice age. Now, when you have archaeological discoveries that contradict the Clovis culture theory that modern man was in North America only about going back to about 13,500 BC or so, okay, about roughly 15,000 years ago or so. When you have archaeological evidence that disputes that, the establishment in archaeology pushes back on that and really tries to subvert that information. But African people were here going back tens of thousands of years, long before 13,500 BC. So these Africans would have been the Khoisan, who have the oldest DNA on the planet. An October 2012 genetic study published in Science magazine found that the Khoisan in Southern Africa are the oldest ethnic group of modern humans, with their ancestral line originating about 10,000 years ago. The Khoisan, formerly called by the derogatory term Bushmen, are genetically unique, and no other currently known population has separated so early from our common modern human ancestor, according to the report. Now, here are a couple Khoisan women. Okay. The Khoisan live mainly in Southern Africa, in territories spanning Botswana, Namibia, Angola, Zambia, Zimbabwe, and South Africa. They are largely divided into two groups: hunters and gatherers, the Sans people, and keepers of the livestock, known as the Khoi people. Now, Sara Baartman, Sartre J. Baartman, Hottentot Venus, okay, was Khoisan. Okay, she was Khoi from Southern Africa. And we know she was sexually exploited, abused, paraded around in freak shows in the early 1800s in Europe. Okay. The Khoisan languages include the distinctive click sounds that are not found in the languages of their neighbors. There's a good article from AtlantaBlackStar.com, 5 groups that prove the first humans were black. This is from AtlantaBlackStar.com. Okay, so check that out. All right, so how you all like this type of information? Give us a thumbs up, give us a heart, give us a like on this broadcast. Visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, so you can register for this full 12-week online history course. And I'm getting ready to, as soon as I finish this broadcast, we're going to jump in the class in my online school and start teaching class number 1. So these classes will be on Saturdays 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're running a little behind schedule today. So I had to get everything set up. But go to our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, scroll down the page. You'll see the second class that I teach, Black Resistance Movements, Christopher Columbus, the Haitian Revolution, and Black Power Movement, 1492 to 1968. We do that on Sundays, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So click right here to register for the second course. You can register for the course bundle for both classes on sale for $120. Click right here to register for the course bundle. This content is PG-13, so you can use this with your children also. I don't do a lot of cursing. It's nothing like that. It's a very visual class. So we have 200 slides in the PowerPoint presentation, video clips that we look at, book references, 80 to 100 articles. And then, we have class number 1 of Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa. Understand the transatlantic slave trade. Click right here to register for that. And the class lesson plan is here for the full course. You can download the class lesson plan. Okay, so there's a ton of information that we cover in this class. I'm just giving you a brief overview. Okay, so have you all learned anything so far? How do you all like this type of information? And who still needs to register for this class? So when we scroll down, we look at some of the other content that we'll cover. We'll look at archaeological discoveries that keep causing the scientists and archaeologists and paleontologists to push the timelines back. And these are archaeological discoveries that show an African presence in parts of the world earlier than people thought. Okay, so there was one good article, Recap Humans Are 100,000 Years Older Than We Thought. This is from the New York Post. We'll look at the lost city. There were 2 lost cities of Egypt. One, dazzling Aten, which was discovered a few years ago, but then also Tanis Heraklion, which was discovered about 2013. Tanis Heraklion, the lost city of Egypt. We'll look at some information from Tony Browder and excerpts of Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization. And I'll show you some excerpts of interviews that I've done with Tony Browder as well. We'll look at the Tekken, the African symbol of resurrection, coming from the story of Asar, Aset, and Heru, who the Greeks called Osiris, Isis, and Horus. So we're going to go through and look at some of the slides here from the presentation, from the PowerPoint presentation. I'm going to show you a few excerpts of lectures I've done as well in the class. You'll get that also. So Tanis Heraklion, the lost city of Egypt. There was a good article from yahoonews.com, April 30th, 2013, that dealt with sunken Egyptian city reveals 1,200-year-old secrets. And they picked up this article from The Telegraph, which is a UK publication. The Telegraph reports that 150 feet beneath the surface of Egypt's Bay of Abu Qir, they found 64 ships, 16-foot tall statues, 700 anchors, countless gold coins, and smaller artifacts. Archaeologist Frank Gaudillo estimates Tanis Heraklion was built around 8th century BC. Here are a couple of the statues that they found at the bottom of the sea. These African statues, these Egyptian statues. This was a good article dealing with an archaeological discovery from out of Morocco, June 7th, 2017. We're older than we thought. New find pushes human origin back 100,000 years. We're older than we thought. New find pushes human origin back 100,000 years. Modern humans evolved much earlier than previously thought, researchers reported Wednesday. New discoveries at a rich site in Morocco show modern humans were hunting and probably cooking game animals 300,000 years ago, 100,000 years earlier than scientists have believed until now. 100,000 years earlier than scientists have believed until now. New discoveries and new dating methods show that, in fact, many of the bones belong to modern Homo sapiens, and they lived as far back as 300,000 to 350,000 years ago. So the deeper they dig, the blacker the planet gets. Okay, the more research they do, the older we get. When these new discoveries come out, they keep having to push the timeline back. You know, Juvenile had that song back about 1999, Back That Thing Up. When these archaeological discoveries come out, they keep having to back the timelines up. They keep having to back the timelines up. And as more discoveries come out that show an African presence in this land called the United States of America, going back 50,000 years ago or more, it becomes harder and harder for the archaeologists to keep pushing the Clovis culture theory. If you saw the interview that I did with Professor Manu Ampem in February 2024, and I've been re-airing excerpts of that because I put together a segment where I deal with Morgan Freeman recently saying he detests Black History Month and he thinks Black History Month is stupid. And in my interview with Professor Manu Ampem, we talked about Dr. Carter G. Woodson and the creation of Negro History Week, but the work that Dr. Woodson was doing with the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, originally Association for the Study of Negro Life and History, ASALH, that he co-founded September 9th, 1915 in Chicago. And the research that he was doing on the continent of Africa and the research he was doing on Ethiopia and Egypt, things of this nature. Okay. All right. So check this out here. Then we'll look at some information. So we look at different African empires, whether it's Nubia, it dates back to about 4,500 BCE. Nubia is the mother of ancient Kemet, ancient Egypt. This was a good discovery right here. Scientists disappointed when he finds out that ancient Egyptian pharaohs were Black Africans. Let's take a look at this.
But the CT scan has one more surprise for Alejandro. Shammai's ethnicity.
Well, they have just told me that Shammai had Nubian features, which means that their ruling family was probably Nubian, and that was unexpected.
Examining Shammai's anatomy closely, the thickness of his bones and the shape of his nasal cavity, the anthropologists think he was a Black African, likely from neighboring Nubia. A huge revelation that challenges the prevailing image of the Egyptian ruling class.
We always thought the ancient Egyptian elites were Mediterranean type, and in this sense, Shammai is representing the society of the frontier, in which different ethnic groups were mixed. At the end, it doesn't matter the color of your skin. Shammai was Egyptian.
The archaeologist in the video is Alejandro Jimenez Serrano. He and his team found a tomb on the western bank of the Nile, opposite Aswan. And as you might have heard, the mummy was called Shammai. So who was Shammai? Not much is known about him, but the little that we know is that he was an ancient Egyptian official who...
Okay, so now he's saying it doesn't matter the color of your skin. But what happened was they proved that he was Africoid. They proved that he was African. And when things like this are revealed, it just turns the archaeological world upside down. Now, this discovery, this is another discovery. Let me show you this right here. This was a video that Tony Browder sent me. after I interviewed Tony, April 2023. We dealt with the importance of Nile Valley contribution, the importance of Nile Valley history. Okay. And we used 2 books in the class from Tony Browder. You don't have to buy any of the books if you don't want to, but you should buy them to support Tony's work. But we used 2 books in the class from Tony Browder. Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization is one of them. And then also Egypt on the Potomac is another one. But Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization is, where's it? Where are my books? I put it on the shelf here. Right here. Okay. I had the bookshelf behind me. I had to rearrange some things in the office, put a bookshelf behind me because I had stacks of books on the floor here. Okay. Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization by Tony Browder. This is one of the best books dealing with African history. So Tony sent me this video that I'm going to show you. And what I did was I added to this video an excerpt of an interview that I did with Professor James Small. When I interviewed Professor James Small dealing with the Woman King, the movie The Woman King. Okay. And Professor James Small talks about what happened to the African Egyptians, the Black African Egyptians. Okay, what happened to them? Let's take a look at this video here. And this is from my YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, Imhotep.
We're now very happy to be joined by our next guest, Dexter Caffey, the founder of Smart Eye app, who recently learned of an eye-opening discovery of his own ancient past, all thanks to a DNA test. He is joining us now by Zoom from Atlanta. Hello, Dexter.
Hello, Emily. How are you?
It's so good to see you. Last time was here in Israel. We got to get you back here, but we'll have to settle for Zoom now. You have such an interesting history. Please explain what made you do a DNA test, and then what happened when you found out all of a sudden that you're related to Ramses III?
That's a great question, Emily. Well, about a year and a half ago, I traveled to places like Israel, France, and different places like that. And so what happened was people would always ask a normal question, where are you from? And I would say the States, United States. And the people I saw in France would say, no, where are you really from? And I said, the States. That's all I know. And so that question stuck with me for a long time. And I just said, where am I actually from? I mean, I know I'm American, but where my DNA is from? And so I said, well, let me take my DNA test. It was a 23andMe DNA test. And I took the test, and I was shocked when I saw the results. It came back, and it showed that I was actually a direct descendant of the Pharaoh Ramses III. And I knew nothing of the pharaohs. Didn't know much about Egypt, but everything you hear about, Bible stories and things like that. So for me, it was a huge shock, and that's how I found out about it.
Wow. So obviously you took it deeper and deeper. You saw all of these synchronicities in looking at images of the pharaoh, how much you and even your brother look like them. And your own company has like an eye logo that looks like the Eye of Horus, unconnected to any of this. So what did this open up for you in terms of your own knowledge and learning about this?
I remember I was actually laying in my bed on Christmas Day, 2021, and I was going through my 23andMe DNA test, and that's when I saw that I was connected to the Pharaoh Ramses III. And again, I knew nothing of this situation. And so I looked up a sculpture of the Pharaoh Ramses III, and when I saw the sculpture, I literally screamed. And my wife said, Dexter, what's wrong? I said, this guy from 4,000 years ago, we look just alike. And she said, Dexter, wait a minute. There were no pictures from 4,000 years ago. I said, no, his sculpture was the Pharaoh Ramses III. His sculpture, we look like identical twins. And she said, let me see it. She saw it. She said, oh, my goodness. And then I continued to go over different sculptures, looking online. And I saw the sculpture that looked just like my brother. If you could show that on the screen, it'd be absolutely amazing. But it was, and I looked at the sculpture and I said, this looks just like my brother Joe. And I called my brother Joe and I said, I'm going to send you something. And he said, where'd you get that from? It looks just like me. I said, that's a sculpture of the Pharaoh Ramses III. And he said, oh my God. I said, that's over 4,000 years old. It looks identical, just like you. So we were blown away, completely blown away.
And talk about the synchronicities. You know, it's funny how, you know, the universe speaks to us. So you have a company that with the eye is a logo. You even have a dog that's similar to the dogs of Pharaoh. What?
As I kept digging more and more, I had a friend who's here in the States. He's from Israel, and he said, Dexter, he said, you know, your logo that you have for your company, the eye that you started like over 4 years ago, looks just like the logo from the Pharaoh Ramses III. I said, what are you talking about? What did they have? And they had the Eye of Horus. And I looked at it, I said, oh my goodness, they had an eye as their logo, and my company's logo was an eye. And again, keep in mind, Emily, I found this out about a year ago. But I had my company established for over 4 years before that, my startup. And so I just kept continuing. I said, this is crazy. We actually have the same image, logo. And so I kept digging further, and I found out that they had dogs called the Pharaoh Hound, which is in the same family as the dogs that I own called Whippets, which are sight hounds. So they run just as fast, chase small prey. That's what they were bred for. So, and then I continued to look at it further, and I said, wait a minute, what was the Pharaoh Ramses III's name? When I actually looked it up, it was, you know, they had different names, of course, but the name was Seti, S-E-T-I, Seti number 2. That was the Pharaoh Ramses III name. Seti number 1 was his father, the one that was the fought against Moses and the let my people go situation. So Seti number 2 was Pharaoh Ramses III. And I said, wait a minute, my company's name is actually Smart Eye Technology Incorporated. If you take the first letters, Smart Eye Technology Incorporated, it comes out to SETI. That blew my mind. I said, this is insane. So I just, everything connected. And I'll never forget, Emily, my first trip to Israel in 2015, I went to the Negev Desert, and I felt so comfortable in a Negev Desert. I remember saying to myself, I feel like I could like live here. But when I did more research, I found out that the Pharaoh Ramses III spent years in the Negev Desert trading. So, again, these are all things I'm learning, and I felt like so much at home, and I just realized why.
Wow, it's incredible. So obviously you're still on your learning journey of, you know, what this all means, but what is it like to kind of be this person who happened to get a test, discover this, and now we're also learning a little bit about what pharaohs look like. You know, we have images from the 10 Commandments, as you noticed, but, you know, what does this tell you? What do you want to do with this information?
I think it's all still learning. I'm still learning. If you saw the image of how I look just like the Pharaoh Ramses III, every day when I look up in the mirror, I look in the mirror and I just see myself, and I said, this is crazy that this image that I see is identical to me. And this was from 4,000 years ago. So I'm still shocked every day when I wake up and look at it.
Thank you so much, Dexter. Next time we'll interview you right here in studio when you get to Israel. Much appreciated.
But there's a conflict between the Dahomey and the Yoruba land. Yoruba land is being invaded by the British, or by this time have been invaded by the British. This is the great burning of Benin and the robbing of Benin and of all of its wealth and art and so forth that we hear about in history, but we don't connect it to nothing, right? But there's a greater Yoruba war going on between the people. And these boundaries called Nigeria, they're not there then, okay?
Right.
They're greater boundaries. People have other kinds of kingdom designs. And there's conflicts between some of these kingdoms, mostly around trade. Okay, but you got something else happening at the same time. As the Muslim wars of genocide and ethnic cleansing has taken place in the Nile Valley with the Mamluk Turks and the Seljuk Turks, and then finally the Ottoman Turks by the 9th century and the end of the 9th century, beginning of the 10th century. They're pushing millions of people out of the Nile Valley into West Africa. Y'all hear what I'm saying? They're pushing millions of people out of the Nile Valley into West Africa, in through Chad, in through Cameroon, into Nigeria, down into Ghana. This population, through what is called Burkina Faso, this is the population of the people. Everybody always asks, what happened to the Egyptians? Well, we're talking to each other here right now, okay? Because a great number of those refugees, millions of refugees, scattered to the south and to the west, because of the Turkish and the Arab ethnic cleansing that goes on for hundreds of years leading up to the 1400s, are caught as the vulnerable population in what becomes known as the transatlantic slave trade. And I know a lot of us don't go there with that piece, but you've got to understand, who are these people? And so the kingdoms like Dahomey on the coast, somebody coming from the north, that's the northeast, have brought captives that they want to sell. So another community, because they don't need that expansion in their population, and this group of captives was either hostile to them or refugees that they felt was taking their space away from them. Okay, and that population, most time, that refugee population was at least able to defend itself, end up being caught in the trade. And it wasn't a trade at all. It was a war of genocide against African people. There was no transatlantic slave trade. Nobody was trading anything. People were being captured. People were being murdered. People were being raped. Villages were being burned to the ground. Okay? People were being slaughtered to get enough so you could make $200-300 in that day's money, which would be a couple of $1,000s in this day's money, or for one human being to do labor in the Western Hemisphere, where he was worked to death in 10 to 15 years and would be replaced with someone else, a process that went on for 400 years plus.
All right, so look, that's going to do it for us. Be sure to visit our website. Okay, so there's an extra clip from playing. All right, so that's two excellent segments that I put together in one video, and that was a fantastic interview I did with Professor James Small dealing with The Woman King, the movie The Woman King. We did an extensive interview. It was about 2 hours back in 2022. So that's on my YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, IMHOTEP. You can check that out. Okay. All right. So be sure to register. Be sure to visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Register for this new 12-week online history course. Class number 1 starts Saturday, July 27th, 2024. We're going to jump in for an abbreviated class as soon as I finish this broadcast here. So you can register for it right now. Register for the full course. And you can download the class lesson plan, the full class lesson plan here for the entire course. Okay, I want to go back to the PowerPoint presentation here briefly. And this is just a brief preview of the content we're going to cover in this class, because I've only skimmed the surface of the course lesson plans. Okay, I've only skimmed the surface of what we're going to cover in this class. So Kemet, Egypt is often referred to, well, the U.S. is often referred to as Egypt of the West. We know the layout of Washington, D.C. is based upon the layout of ancient Kemet, ancient Egypt. Tony Browder deals with this in his book, Egypt on the Potomac, which we talk about here in the class as well. There's a good article from face-to-faceafrica.com called Cleopatra's Needle, how 3 ancient Egyptian obelisks ended up in New York City, London, and Paris, France. And the obelisks are what are called tekenu, teken for singular, tekenu for plural. And these were symbols of resurrection coming from the story of Asar, Aset, and Heru, who the Greeks called Osiris, Isis, and Horus. Here we see the tekenu from London, England, New York City, and Paris, France. Ancient Egyptians called obelisks tekenu, and they were also used to tell the time in the past. Their pinnacles were basically covered in gold to reflect the sunlight. Historians say that obelisks represented immortality and eternity, and their long structure helped connect the heavens and the earth. Currently, Cleopatra's Needle is the name given to 3 ancient Egyptian obelisks, one in New York City, one in London, England, and one in Paris, France. However, they do not all come from one Egyptian site. Okay. and they talk about how the two obelisks were commissioned by Nesubiti Thutmose III, or Pharaoh Thutmose III, for the Temple of the Sun in Heliopolis, near modern-day Cairo. This is a famous statue of Asar in the middle, Asar, Aset, and Heru, who the Greeks called Osiris, Isis, and Horus, and known as the First Holy Trinity. We know Heru was born of a virgin birth. Now, some of this information may go outside the circumference of some people's awareness. Just because you disagree with it or don't like it does not mean it's not true. Just means you have to do some research to understand what we're talking about. Okay. So Asar, Aset, and Heru, who the Greeks called Osiris, Isis, and Horus. He was born of a virgin birth on December 25th to the virgin Aset. We know that Aset means she of throne. It could mean she is throne also. And she's associated with love and fertility. Now, there were approximately 1,200 Tekhenu built in ancient Kemet in ancient times, but only about a dozen are found in Egypt today. Many of the Tekhenu removed from Egypt are now in Istanbul, Turkey, London, England, Paris, France, Berlin, Germany, New York, Rome, Italy, Vatican City, and elsewhere throughout the world. The Tekhenu are now called obelisks by their new owners, and few know their origin or that they symbolize the resurrection of the African king Asar. If you read page 17 of Egypt on the Potomac by Tony Browder deals with this information there. Now, when we look at Freemasonry, right? Freemasonry has its origins in ancient Africa, especially the Nile Valley region of Africa. The word Mason is derived from the Latin words mass and sun. Mason means child of light and expresses the desire to pursue light, which is a metaphor for the sun, which symbolizes knowledge. The term child of light, or sons and daughters of light, was first used to identify students who had completed 42 years of study in the temples of ancient Kemet. Many Masonic temples were modeled after the temples of ancient Kemet, places where knowledge was imparted in a series of steps or degrees. Okay, so the concept of going to a liberal arts school, or even the concept of liberal arts, comes out of the Nile Valley region of Africa. In Stolen Legacy by George G.M. James, he talks about the seven liberal arts, the trivium and the quadrivium. He talks about the logic and the arithmetic and rhetoric, things of this nature. Okay. In the concept of going to an institution of higher learning and getting your credentials in a series of degrees comes out of ancient Africa. But in the Grand Lodges, in their temples, you study for 42 years and you got 360 degrees of knowledge. Europeans learn less than 10% of what Africans taught them in the ancient Egyptian mystery system, ancient Kemetic mystery system. Europeans learn less than 10% of what the ancient Africans taught them. So the highest degree in Freemasonry is 33 degrees. Okay, 10% of 360 is 36. 33 is less than the 36. They learn less than 10% of what the Africans knew, the ancient Africans knew. Now, Masonic temples are considered houses of light or temples of learning, the Per-Ankh, the house of life. Okay. The term Mason, child of light, is a direct reference to the highest degree of the ancient Kemetic education system. The 33 degrees of instruction within Freemasonry represent a fraction of the 360 degrees of instruction that comprised the Kemetic system of education. Yet with less than 10% of the wisdom of ancient Kemet, Freemasons have held position of influence and power throughout the world for over 200 years. Okay, read page 33 of Egypt on the Potomac by Tony Browder. Also, 50 of the 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence and 13 of the 13 signers of the U.S. Constitution were Freemasons. And 4 of the first 5 U.S. presidents were Freemasons, and there have been 14 Freemasons who have been U.S. presidents altogether. Read page 18 of Egypt on the Potomac. So here's a famous statue of Aset and Heru, and then from Aset and Heru we get the Black Madonna and Child, and from that we get the White Mary and Jesus. As you have a rise in European powers coming out of the Dark Ages, going into like the 1400s, 1500s, as you have a rise in European powers, you start having a rise in the dominance of the European phenotype and a suppression of the African phenotype. And we're going to see this reflected in artwork. We're going to see this reflected in things like when Michelangelo paints the Sistine Chapel, okay, in the early 1600s, I think it was, he paints the Sistine Chapel. He uses his aunt and uncle as the model for Adam and Eve. We know that Europeans were worshiping the Black Madonna and Child even before the Moors go in. Let me look at something here. Yeah, early 1500, 1508 to 1512. Yeah, early 16th century. The Sistine Chapel is painted. Okay, I'm going to post a link here again so you can register for this course. We're going to wrap up here in a few minutes. I'm going to jump in so we can teach the first portion of this class. So we take you through our history, and then we'll go through and look at some of the history of the Moors in Europe, and the Moors taking the teachings from the Nile Valley region of Africa, taking it into Europe. We'll look at things like why is Christmas celebrated on December 25th, because nowhere in the biblical text does it state that Yeshua or Jesus the Christ was born on December 25th. That deals with astronomy, and that deals with the winter solstice. And we know that the winter solstice is connected to Christmas being celebrated. Okay, and the winter solstice also is connected to the first day of winter. First day of winter occurs usually on December 20th or December 21st, right in that period of time. And December 25th marks an increase in the amount of sunlight. After December 21st, there's each subsequent day, there's an increase in the amount of sunlight. This all deals with astronomy. So we'll look at some of the history of the Moors going into Europe, and they go in from Morocco into Spain and Portugal, what at that time was called the Iberian Peninsula. They settle in southern Spain. They call it Al-Andalus, which basically means to walk in the spiritual path or walk in the spiritual light. We know the word Moors, the word derived from the Greek word maros, M-A-U-R-O-S, which literally means black or a very dark color. The Romans adopt this word and call them Mari, M-A-U-R-I. The Mari were Northwest African people who were very dark-skinned. The Romans will refer to the region of Northwest Africa as Mauritania. Mauritania is Latin and means the land of the black-skinned people. You also see the term Marish, M-A-U-R-I-S-H, Marish. Now, Romans later adopt the word as a reference for the black-skinned inhabitants they encountered in Africa. If you look at pages 527 and 187, The Golden Age of the Moor, edited by Dr. Ivan van Sertima, he breaks down this history. So we'll go through and look at some of that history. We'll look at some history of General Tariq ibn Ziyad, who goes in, invades in 711 AD into the Iberian Peninsula, and Tariq and his army, they're going to defeat the Vandals and the Visigoths. So we'll look at some of that history. We'll talk some about the Queen Cleopatra VII as well, in the documentary series from Jada Pinkett Smith, African Queens, that and there was an installment that dealt with Queen Cleopatra. So we'll talk about that some as it relates to history. There's so much in the class that we deal with, and then we'll, as we go throughout history, look at this history chronologically. We also deal with Christopher Columbus, because Columbus is so important to understand, because Columbus helps lay the foundation for slavery, racism, capitalism, and the exploitation of indigenous people. When we look at where he goes on his 4 voyages, he never came to the land we call the United States of America. The closest he comes here is Cuba, which is 90 miles away, but he's going to conquer Hispaniola in 1492. That's where you have the Dominican Republic and Haiti. He conquers Jamaica, 1494, Puerto Rico in 1493. So he goes into the Caribbean and South America, Central America. He never comes to the land that we call the United States of America. But I mean, Columbus's voyages, that's going to lead to the Asiento de Negros, signed by King Charles V, or King Charles I, in August of 1518. Okay, that's going to lead to that. Okay, the Asiento. And we're going to read about people like Bartholomew de las Casas, Right Reverend Bishop Bartholomew de las Casas, who traveled on voyages with Columbus and kept a diary, and those diaries were turned into books. Britannica.com has a good article dealing with the Asiento de Negros. This right here. And this was a license the Spanish crown issued to various European nations and slave traders, etc. And they paid a tribute, they paid a fee each year to Spain to be able to supply them with African slaves. This is drastically going to expand the transatlantic slave trade. Asiento de Negros, between the early 16th and mid 18th century, an agreement between the Spanish crown and a private person or another sovereign power, by which the latter was granted a monopoly in supplying African slaves for the Spanish colonies in the Americas. The contractor, the ostentista, agreed to pay a certain amount of money to the Spanish crown for the monopoly, and to deliver a stipulated number of male and female slaves for sale in the American markets. The first such contractor was a Genoese company that in 1517 agreed to supply 1,000 slaves over an 8-year period. Okay, so who had never heard of the Asiento de Negros? This is what's going to drastically expand the transatlantic slave trade. So these are the type of things that we deal with in this class. There's so much history that we cover. Okay, so visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Register for this class and the second class that I teach on Sundays. Black Resistance Movements, Christopher Columbus, the Haitian Revolution, and Black Power Movement, 1492 to 1968. That's on Sundays. Next class, Sunday, July 28th, 2024, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Click right here to register for that. You can register for the bundle pack of courses. You get both classes for $120. If you've taken any of my online courses in the past, if you paid to take any of my online courses in the past, let me rephrase that, you'll get a discount on the bundle pack of both of these classes. So just email me through the website or email me at ahnshow@theafricanhistorynetwork.com. And we'll get you enrolled at a discount. And then the first class, Christopher, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Class number 1, Saturday, July 27th. And we'll normally teach class 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And download, we have the class lesson plan here. Download the class lesson plan. Now, you can be sure to watch the African History Network show Sundays, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Facebook and YouTube. Download the iHeartRadio app to your smartphone because we're on iHeartRadio as well. Wherever you get your podcast from, your audio podcast, search for the African History Network show. And click right here to listen to podcasts on our Blog Talk Radio channel. You can support us through Cash App and PayPal, $ the AHN show through Cash App, $ the AHN show through Cash App. Also through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN show. So click right here for the link. We have our QR code right here. So you can support us $5, $10, $15, $25, $50, $100 or more. This helps us keep doing the research, stay on the air, keep broadcasting, pay some of these bills as well, because we're dealing with some significant financial challenges here in July that I have to take care of this month. You can support us through PayPal as well. And this is our official Cash App account, $ the AHN show, SHOW. When you go to it, it'll say, Michael, these other ones here are some fake African History Network Cash App accounts I'm still trying to get shut down. All right, so look, we have to get out of here and I have to teach this class. Remember, right now is correct wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. Wakanda forever. Hopefully you learned a lot today. Hope to see you and your family in class. Follow us on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network. Follow us on our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, IMHOTEP. And turn on live notifications so you know when we go live. Remember, right now is correct